Welcome to today's episode of Buildings Hub Live, where we spotlight the changemakers and technologies leading the charge to electrify our built environment. On our podcast, we tackle the issues facing building decarbonization, from space heating to water heaters to electric cooking and beyond. On this episode, we'll chat with Laruen Ross, Deputy Director for Energy Justice in the Office of Energy Justice and Equity at the U.S. Department of Energy, and Dylan Martello, Senior Building Systems Consultant at Stephen Winter Associates. How do we make building electrification and decarbonization accessible for low-income renters and ensure they are not left behind? Where are we seeing successes in guaranteeing affordability, comfort, and energy savings? Here's your host, Atlas Public Policy Analyst, Stephen Naimoli.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 15th episode of Buildings Hub Live. My name is Stephen Naimoli, Policy Analyst at Atlas Public Policy, and I have the honor of being your host today. For today's episode, we'll discuss decarbonizing affordable housing. How do we ensure that everyone is able to access the health benefits, comfort, and financial savings that come with housing? Before we jump into our discussion today, a quick note on Buildings Hub. Here at Atlas, we manage a one-stop shop data analysis tool for building sector electrification called Buildings Hub. If you're interested in heat pump market data, state building stock, designed dashboards, we've got you covered. We recently posted a new data story on the latest heat pump sales data, and we've got another data story coming up soon on affordability and energy burden in the United States, so keep an eye out. We encourage you to register for our platform and check out our data features. We'd love to have you join the Buildings Hub community. As for this episode, questions via the Q&A portal on our YouTube at the U.S. Department of Energy, and Dylan Martello, Senior Building Systems Consultant at Stephen Winter Associates. Laruen and Dylan, thank you so much for being with us today. We have lots to cover and only half an hour, so let's get right to it. So, Dylan, I'll start with you. You're at Stephen Winter Associates. Can you tell us a little bit about what role your company plays in decarbonizing affordable housing?
Yeah, absolutely. So our company has been around for over 50 years. We're based in the Northeast with offices in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, and Washington, D.C. And we've really worked in high energy efficiency buildings. We do accessibility. We do green building certifications. I particularly work in our Passive House group, our projects that pursue Passive House certification. And affordable housing is a market typology that we work in on a very regular basis. It's one of our biggest building typologies and type of project that we work on. So, I work on affordable housing and decarbonization of affordable housing recently, as far as electrification goes, and as far as just general, achieving the highest level of efficiency we can get out of affordable housing, multifamily buildings. So that's my day to day, and it's in the Passive House framework that I work in primarily.
That's great, and I want to come back to the Passive House in a little bit, but thanks for laying that out. Laruen, you are Deputy Director for Energy Justice. You have been involved in a few different areas at Department of Energy. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of what role that you have played here, and specifically in tying decarbonization to affordable housing?
Sure. Thank you all for having me. I am very excited to be here today and participate in this conversation. As Stephen mentioned, I'm currently the Deputy Director of Energy Justice within the department, or within the Office of Energy Justice and Equity at the U.S. Department of Energy. In this role, I oversee research, policy development and analyses, and agency-wide engagement around helping the organization reach its equity and energy justice goals. And so in this role in particular, we, are kind of extending the conversation around new decarbonization technology and pathways, so that we're bringing kind of the realities, the on the ground implementation, to our technology offices within and across the agency. What are the realities of the affordable housing sector? These are some of the questions we answer and often engage with program offices around. So we, our affordable housing is one key area where we, really want to make sure that DOE investments, DOE research is addressing, and that affordable housing residents and owners from both a policy program and then kind of a learning opportunity are being served. We also provide policy recommendations on some key program areas like weatherization and the home energy rebates that particularly address the affordable housing sector. And then I'll just say, kind of zooming out a bit and more broadly, our office really helps spotlight the intersection between housing realities, the realities of affordable housing, and clean energy needs, and how I think the two can be deployed together, or how clean energy can be successfully and effectively implemented in that sector.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So to level set a little bit for our audience before we kind of really jump into the meaty questions, I want to ask both of you, from your perspective in your career and your work, what makes affordable housing different from say, market rate housing when it comes to decarbonization? Lauren, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I think my simplest response to that is the physical quality, the state of the housing sector itself in terms of capital needs, operating needs, and resources, and then also the financial resources of the owners and operators of affordable housing, as well as the residents which reside in this housing. When it comes to decarbonization, owners of affordable housing, operators, renters themselves do not have the upfront capital to invest in this new technology, or even cover the margin between this new technology and needed equipment upgrades. And also the majority of this housing is existing, and so really requires unique solutions to decarbonization that not only fit within the budget of residents and owners, but also doesn't lead to displacement of residents in the short term, and can retrofitting a new building is much harder than building, and much more expensive oftentimes than doing it from scratch. And so those are the realities. New affordable housing is not being built. It is being built not nearly at the pace of market rate housing. And so that's the, kind of the financial and physical realities of that housing stock. And one other point that I'll make is that renters, those that reside in affordable housing, renters and owners of affordable housing, I'll say, have very tight margins. Rent is already high. It's increasingly unaffordable. And so, the ability for owners to pass on costs to renters is not there. Low wage occupations barely pay enough for housing to be affordable for this subsector. And so the margins are really tight, both on behalf of residents and the owners and operators of these buildings. So it's just, there's a different reality when it comes to being able to invest, pay for this new technology.
Great, thank you. And Dylan, you have worked on a variety of types of projects, of course, but one thing I'd love to ask you about a little bit there is, Lauren mentioned, the difference between existing and new build. I know that you've worked on building new affordable housing that has been very high performance. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the evolution of the types of projects that I work on, which are passive house developments, is really the lowest load, in terms of, it's the highest level of energy efficiency that you could get from a design standard, essentially. And the majority of those projects have been new construction. We are doing some existing buildings now, and have a couple that have been completed in the last few years, which is really exciting. And they present their own challenges. But from a new construction standpoint, it does make things a little bit easier in terms of planning for some of the more technical things, like where you're going to put your systems in the building, and just sort of planning for that is a bit easier from a new construction standpoint. So, as far as the approach to decarbonizing buildings, with a new construction, we're looking at, what's the most efficient way we can build this building from scratch, and what sort of systems do we need, and what level of envelope performance do we need, and that's sort of taken from really conceptual design, is when this is sort of reviewed with design teams and project teams to determine the most efficient way to build this building that achieves the level of performance that we want, but obviously is done in a way that's accessible from a cost standpoint. With existing buildings, it's a bit of a different story, and it's more about, okay, what is already there, and how can we reuse what's there, or do we need to demo what's already there, or a significant portion of what's already there? Can we reuse piping for things like a hydronic loop for heating and cooling systems in these buildings? So the question about how do we design efficiently is very driven by what's already in place, and what can we reuse or kind of adapt with, and that's what makes existing buildings challenging and exciting at the same time. But it's a little bit different of a sort of an approach to attack, essentially, how we decarbonize those buildings.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about Passive House, and how that certification maybe differs from something like LEED or Energy Star homes, or even like the Zero Energy Ready homes from DOE?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's funny, because we work on all green building certifications, and we have many staff that are experts in other ones. So I'm constantly trying to learn as much as I can about the other certifications. I'm by no means an expert on the other ones, but I know a little bit, enough to be dangerous. And I would say the biggest difference with regards to Passive House and some of these other standards like ZERH and LEED and Energy Star, to name a few, is that the Passive House standard is much more of a performance-based standard that gives flexibility in terms of the design decisions to achieve the level of energy efficiency that's required. And what I mean by that is there's an energy model that is the foundation for what drives the design requirements for a building to meet Passive House. And essentially, whoever's running the energy model puts in the building's shell and puts in the geometry, the different internal loads and things like that, and they determine, okay, is the design that we prescribed for this building meeting the energy target thresholds? If not, we need to change something with the design to get there, but we have the flexibility to change something. So we could look at, hey, maybe if we replaced our windows with this other window type, or maybe if we looked at insulating more in our roof as opposed to these walls. It gives you that flexibility, as opposed to, I think, where other standards are a little bit more prescriptive, like a check box, and you got to hit this and that, and these sorts of laundry list of things, which are all good, and they do cover important aspects of a building. But Passive House is really focused on driving energy use down in buildings. We're talking about, we're seeing energy use data from operational Passive House projects use about 50% less than buildings built to conventional standards for even large-scale multifamily buildings. So it's really about driving that energy use down. And then what it also layers on top of that is a component of comfort and building durability and resiliency. So those are kind of the main highlights of what makes Passive House and different from those other standards.
That's great. Yeah, that emphasis on performance and really being able to see that performance improvement is really valuable. Lauren, so in your time at DOE, recently the department announced the Affordable Home Energy Shot, and that's something that you have been really involved in. Can you tell us a little bit about what that initiative is, and kind of what it's trying to accomplish?
Sure. And you'll hear in my comments, I'm very excited about this. To me, this is DOE's putting a stake in the ground to really further affordable housing decarbonization. And so before I kind of jump into what that is, let me just take a step back and give some context on DOE's energy earthshots. These are technical and cost targets in next generation clean energy technologies that we at the Department of Energy have determined that are really needed to address climate change. President Biden charged DOE with speeding up the development of these critical technologies, and Secretary Granholm's vision was really this new kind of moonshot. The Affordable Home Energy Shot is the 8th and final Earth shot to be launched. And it's aimed at accelerating innovative strategies and reducing the cost to decarbonize the nation's residential buildings. Some of you might recall DOE's Sunshot initiative, which aimed to reduce the cost of solar energy by 75%. This is developed in a similar fashion. And then under this initiative, the target is to reduce the upfront cost of upgrading a home by at least 50%, while reducing energy bills by 20% within a decade. That underscores my earlier point too, that residents cannot afford higher bills. So how do we not only advance the technology needed for this unique building sector, but do so in a way that doesn't increase energy bills? And this, 2 points I want to also make about this Earth shot. This is the first to directly address energy use in the building sector. And it's the first to really center equity, ensuring that we're serving those in the housing sector that need it the most. It's a call on behalf of Department of Energy to ensure that building decarbonization benefits all households, especially those facing high energy burdens. It's really, in a way, meant to tackle the issue of energy affordability, which we know plagues so many households. And it's also kind of an organizing mechanism within the department. So we have deployment happening right now through bill programs and IRA. And then at the same time, we have research and development underway. And we want to make sure that the two are very much tied together, that we're learning about what's happening on the ground through weatherization, through home energy upgrades, and then it's being feed back into the research and development efforts and vice versa. And within this Earth shot, we're really focusing on 3 main technology areas of the building. First being the envelope, minimizing air leakage and increasing insulation, which we know are primary drivers of inefficiency in this housing sector. We also know that improving the envelope, improving insulation, doesn't just reduce the heating and cooling load of the building, but can also decrease mold and moisture within the building, and just improve resiliency and overall durability. Second is efficient electrification. So here focusing on the deployment of electric appliances and equipment. But again, starting with the envelope, we're really trying to right size this equipment, making sure that it's smaller, more compact, and that can be installed in a flexible way to not displace occupants. And then lastly, the third technology under this Earth shot that we're diving into is smart controls. So how can households effectively manage energy consumption patterns and reduce the need for costly electrical upgrades? So it's thinking here about the integration of solar and storage within these buildings, utility demand response, giving owners some control over how they use energy too, and in a smart and efficient way. So in a nutshell, that's the Affordable Home Energy Earth shot. And I'll say to those listening, we have the public launch of this Earth shot next Wednesday, June 5th, and it is virtual. So please visit the website and tune in if you can.
That's fantastic. And it's very exciting to see the Department of Energy, really taking on this very, I would say, underappreciated sort of sector of the economy and all of the decarbonization opportunities that are available here. So really is great to see. So we've touched on this a little bit, but I want to kind of address it very specifically. When you are decarbonizing or electrifying your home, you're bringing gains in energy efficiency, savings on energy bills, and when you're a homeowner, that is you get to make those decisions. That is well within your purview. But if you're a renter, these kinds of decisions usually fall to the unit or building owner, and the unit and building owner don't necessarily reap the benefit of those energy savings. So how do you kind of overcome these split incentives to help renters, especially low-income renters? Lauren, why don't we start with you?
Sure. There's 3 points I want to make when it comes to, there's always 3 points I want to make when it comes to the issue of split incentives. But I think from the top, I want to say the split incentive issue is never going to disappear. And this is why really tackling the high upfront cost, why we need policy and programmatic complements to this new technology is going to be essential. And then the other point, and I'll touch on this a little bit more in a second, is really understanding the multiple benefits that decarbonization offers affordable housing owners and renters. But the 3 points that I want to leave you with on this issue is that to address the split incentive, we really need to focus on key intervention points when upgrades occur. And so again, most of affordable housing has been built already. And so how do you make sure that critical times of equipment swap outs, renovation, that you're doing these deep energy upgrades alongside them, that in itself and aligning those retrofits is going to reduce the cost? How also do you make sure that owners, when they are at those kind of key intervention points, know about existing rebates and incentives to buy down the cost or reduce that margin between the green and not so green upgrade? And then lastly, and this responds to my point around understanding the multiple benefits that decarbonization offers. And that's that we need to highlight the synergies in energy improvements and other value streams. So one obvious example is when you do envelope upgrades, they really play a big role and can play a big role in increasing building resilience, especially in times of extreme temperature changes or extreme storms. How can that be leveraged to reduce insurance costs, which have really plagued the affordable multifamily space in the last year? They've skyrocketed, and they're on track to continue in that way. So how can we think about how deep efficiency, major envelope upgrades can help reduce those costs? Understanding the benefits to the owners as well as the renters.
Great, thank you. Dylan, what's your perspective?
Yeah, so one common thread that keeps coming up, I think, and a lot of work we do is in New York City. And New York City affordable housing, the building owner pays for heat. They're not required to pay for cooling, but they do have to pay for heat. However, what we're finding is a lot of systems are done that can do. You have a system in a building that's for heating and cooling, right? So it's the way that gets metered, and the energy costs of the heating and cooling in particular get passed on to either the tenant or not passed on if it's in the case of heating is one that's been really an interesting aspect. And one thing that we found recently is that a lot of building owners are under the mindset of, we already have to pay for heating, and it's costly and challenging technically to pass the cooling energy use on to residents. So what a lot of owners are moving towards is just, we're going to pay for heating and cooling. And in terms of the cooling cost, if we can bake that into the rent anyway, we might do that. But the building owner in that case is then reaping the energy savings cost benefits of designing to a higher standard, as opposed to having that split incentive. So I think that helps a lot. It doesn't necessarily solve, in some cases, the domestic hot water aspect, which is the biggest piece of the pie now in multifamily affordable housing. buildings, really the water, the heating energy for hot water consumption for domestic use, like cooking and showering, is really the biggest component left of the energy use. And, if you have a central system like we see a lot in New York City, and bigger urban cities as where we'll see a lot more central, that cost is taken on by the owner in most cases. So they don't have to worry about that split incentive, but it does get more challenging when it's the resident paying for that cost and the owner's not reaping the energy savings benefit of the hot water consumption. So I think one way to help with that is to just have the owner pay for everything and then pass those utility costs on to residents as needed in basically the rent pricing. So, it's not a perfect solution. It's not, it's not going to solve every problem, but that's one discussion that we're seeing happen a lot now in this specific realm.
Yeah, there's absolutely, I think it's pretty clear that like there's a role, there are kind of technical solutions, there are policy solutions, there are other, various kinds of ways that innovations that we can take to try to get there. Dylan, I'm going to stick with you, and we only have a few minutes left. But just if you could kind of briefly tell me a little bit about a project that you're particularly excited about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So for one, I'd say one project in the realm of affordable housing, we just actually attended the ribbon cutting for Sendero Verde, which is one of the largest multifamily affordable housing passive house projects really in the world. It's close to 750 total apartments stretched over two buildings, and it's fully passive house, and the final building will be certified hopefully this year. And it's the tallest building is 35 stories. So these are big buildings. And we actually started to look at energy use data from one of the buildings that's been in operation now for over a year, and has had full occupancy for over a year. And we're seeing the energy use of that building come in, again, about at least 50% less than some of the benchmarks for conventional buildings. So it's much needed affordable housing. I learned that project had for every one apartment, they had 200,000 applicants, or they had 200,000 applicants in total, but stretched over just 700 apartments. It's the ratio of how many people are looking for affordable housing to what's available is really still disproportionate. So the takeaway from that is we need to build 2,000 more of these buildings in this area alone just to deal with the affordable housing crisis that we have. So it helped put things in perspective for me, who works more in the technical design side, energy efficiency. You can get lost in the weeds with that sometimes and forget about the overarching goal, which is we need to provide housing that's affordable to folks right now. But we're now doing that in a way that is extremely comfortable to live in. This place, the Sendero Verde project's right next to the Metro North line, which runs into Grand Central Terminal. So there's loud trains going by every day, and people say they can barely hear them. It's extremely quiet in there because of these energy efficiency measures that also have comfort co-benefits too. So that's one project that I'm super excited about. It's pretty much just about finished in terms of construction. We have many more in design and in construction that I'm also excited about, but that's one I would highlight.
That's really exciting. Thank you. Lauren, I'll turn to you. What is one project that you're excited about, whether maybe it's technology or a housing development or an element of the Affordable Home Energy Shot Initiative?
Great. Well, I'm going to speak, I think, across all those buckets. And what I'm most excited about, and I'm following very closely, and just, as a few months ago was part of that team, are the home energy rebates coming out of the Department of Energy. This refers to $9 billion in rebates that was authorized through the Inflation Reduction Act. Half of that funding goes towards deep home efficiency projects, and the other towards rebates for electric appliances and equipment. Those rebates in general, I'll spare us some of the weeds details right now, but in general, those programs are oriented towards low-income households. They work for both renters, owners, and multifamily buildings. In fact, the Department of Energy has required that at least they will be funneled through state energy offices, and the Department of Energy has required that at least 10% of rebates, which is very much a floor for all states, goes towards affordable multifamily buildings. Upwards of 40% must at least go to low-income households. So this is a huge opportunity that is really playing out across the U.S. right now. In terms of what I'm excited about, this is in some states will lead to the first multifamily programs that support decarbonization. And by nature, then we'll be bringing along a workforce that is newly trained to do this work in multifamily buildings. So creating markets where they didn't exist before for doing this type of work, hopefully mainstreaming decarbonization in the affordable housing sector, and putting state agencies like state energy offices at the forefront, and really driving innovation. I think the big challenge is, okay, there's rebates, but how do we braid other programs to continue to bring down the cost to make these deep efficiency and electrification upgrades feasible in these properties? And so I'm excited now to see the rollout of these rebates. New York State today just announced its first program. And 5 years from now, I'm excited to look back and see, how these rebates changed the market for affordable housing decarbonization.
That's great. Yeah, we're definitely keeping a close eye on the home energy rebates here at Atlas, and really interested in seeing how those move forward. Well, we are just getting to the end here, so I want to give one really lightning round question for both of you. When it comes to energy efficiency and sustainability, if you had to describe the future of affordable housing in one word, what word would that be? Lauren, you first.
I think I'd go with adaptable. We need to find solutions that work with existing building stock and that really can adapt to the unique and distinct needs of affordable housing residents.
Great. Dylan, what about you?
I would say committed. I think some of the most committed project teams to doing it right and getting it right are the affordable housing projects. It's quite an amazing experience to be a part of these teams, and some of the most talented and committed people I've ever worked with. So committed.
I'd love to hear that. That's great. Well, thank you so much to both of you. And thank you to our audience for joining us. You'll be able to find a recording of this episode and any of our past episodes anywhere you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and check out atlasbuildingshub.com to read our digests and data stories and join our community. Stay tuned for a new episode of Buildings Hub Live soon, and we'll see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Buildings Hub Live. You can listen to this episode and all other installments in our podcast on the Atlas YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. If you're interested in additional content, check out our data, articles, and dashboards on Buildings Hub at atlasbuildingshub.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you again soon.